The saying of the day is Stephen Curry, great basketball player in the NBA, said, play like you're in first place and train like you're in second place. Train hard. Mm-hmm. And he was a player that played at Davidson, which is a good school, very good academically. And he played a lot, but he was not sought after. But Kentucky and Indiana and UCLA and Duke and all those schools did not go after him. And he proved them wrong. And he's like a lot of players in different sports will peak at different ages. And he is one of those guys that peaked in the late 20s, early 30s. There are other players that'll peak when they're 17 or 18. University of Texas signed a guy named Linus Bear one time who was a great college player, but he was as good when he was a senior in high school as he was when he was a sophomore in college. Mm-hmm. And he played against, he was San Antonio, played against Warren McVeigh, who was also from San Antonio. And Warren McVeigh, he didn't peak in high school, but he peaked in college and played for Houston Cougars and was a great player. But all this, I want to say that, we got March Madness coming up, and that'll be exciting. There's always all kinds of office pools. Mm-hmm. Everybody's trying to pick out their top teams. There'll be 68 teams in the tournament. 4 will be what they call play-in games, and that's not listed on people's on their brackets.
Right.
And but the listing really come down to the first 64 players, and you can make some money. And it's not illegal if the house is not collecting any money and you're just doing it friendly wise. In Vegas, there's always millions of dollars available if you get it perfect. Well, you're not going to get that many games perfect. Mm-hmm. You can't get 5 games perfect. 5-team parlays almost impossible to get. But basketball, it's something that everyone can play. And a lot of them aren't very good. Part of the deal is what kind of team you're going to have, so what kind of players you pick. And I had a friend that Corky Oglesby was a recruiter for Texas Tech, and he was a great recruiter. But he had a funny sense of humor, and Corky would have a deal that he rated the players and everything. But as he'd go from game to game, he'd rate the popcorn at the high school games. And small towns, one year the best popcorn was in Livingston, Texas. They had a 6'11" kid, and it was in Livingston. And that they had the Lions Club did the popcorn, and they got the best rating. And the cities didn't get as good of ratings because in the country and in the rural areas, it was done by the Lions Club or First Methodist Church or something like that. And they made sure the cotton candy was good and the popcorn was good, because if they didn't, people would talk about it at church. Your popcorn's not very good. And Corky used to go recruiting. He loved recruiting around Austin because his favorite barbecue spots were in Lockhart and Luling and Elgin, and some great barbecue. But he could pick good players, and he could pick good barbecue. Some of his picks on pizza and things like that, he would go and you would have a situation that he'd base it on volume of food, and so if you were on a diet, Corky Oglesby was not the guy to be on the diet with, because he would load up a lot of carbs and a lot of fat grams at the same time.
Now, speaking of basketball, didn't you lead Dimmitt High School to the state playoffs?
I didn't. I was on the team. We went to the state championship game my junior and senior year, and we had a player my senior year named Junior Coffey, and one of the first blacks to play in the state tournament. Great guy. Went on to play football at the University of Washington and made All-American. And he was an All-American on his senior year. And Donnie Anderson from Stinnett, Texas, a little town less than 100 miles from Dimmitt, was also an All-American on that team. And Junior was drafted and played his first year at Green Bay. and then he played the next 9 years for the Atlanta Falcons, who did not have a good line, and he was the running back without a good offensive line. And said on Mondays he would just have to soak. He'd just be so beat up. And he wound up having a hip replacement and, knee replacement, and he even wound up with an ankle replacement. I didn't know you could get an ankle replacement. And but I did the eulogy at his funeral, and when he passed away, one of the things we pointed out is that at the time that he died, he was the winningest trainer in thoroughbred racing in the state of Washington. It was in the top in California, and he ran in Southern California in winters. But not only did he play in the NFL for 11 years, but he was a great horse trainer and loved animals. And in high school, he showed animals. And one time, some people stole he had a hog and I had a hog. They were going to show at the Fat Stock Show, and they stole our hogs and they barbecued them. and the ag teacher, Mr. Sill, he said, if we find it, do you think you could pick it out of a crowd if they got it in barbecue? and Junior said, I believe I could. Mr. Sill was the one, I've told stories about him before. He would tell us if you cut a piece of wire or string or rope too long, there's nothing you can do. You have to throw it away. But if you cut it too short, you can always splice it. And he said the government came up with that saying, and that's the way they looked at things. But Mr. Sill would he would do anything for the boys. He was a great teacher. He was one of my favorite teachers, and he taught us a lot of things, a lot of sayings and things like that. But he took us to the state fair every year during football season, and we'd leave after Friday night's game and drive all night to the state fair in a cattle trailer with hay on the bottom and the tarp above you, and then put some bedrolls in there on the hay. And one time a couple of guys were smoking, and they caught the hay on fire. We're going down the road on fire, and people are trying to pass the truck and get their attention and get them to look, and they finally got them to pull over. And nobody died, nobody got hurt badly, but Mr. Sill told us, the boys, if you want to sit back here, you can't start fires.
Right.
And says, well, we'd never thought of that. And but he was a funny guy, and he told us, if he told you, if you do such and such, I'm going to whip you, he didn't mean that he was going to talk to you again. He meant the belt was coming off and you were in bad shape. And he whipped my friend Tony. And Tony's dad came up to school the next day and complained to him about him whipping his son with a belt. And they kind of got into it and had a few words, and he wound up whipping the dad with a belt, And the school board didn't hire him or fire him or give him a new contract, old contract. They just let everything stay like it was. And somebody asked him why. They said, hell, we didn't want to get whipped with that belt. And but he told us when we went to the state fair, at midnight on Saturday night, the truck's going to leave and go back to Dimmitt. And if you're on the truck at midnight, you'll get to go back. If you don't, you're on your own. And my friend Red Dog Morris and I, we were there, at about 15 to 12. We didn't want to get left. And there were three guys that weren't there at midnight, and he ran off and left them. And one of them hitchhiked back to Dimmitt and got there before we did. And it's Snake Adams and Mr. Sill was really upset that he'd beat us back. But a couple of guys, they took 2 or 3 days to get back.
I think it's amazing that all these years later, you remember your high school teachers, or teachers in general, had a big impact on you.
It did. I loved them. Ava Smith is still alive. We thought she was old when we were students, and she's probably late 20s. We were in high school, but she taught American history and world history, and was she made it exciting. Mm-hmm. But she, one time when I went to class, I was cutting up or something, she kind of got on to me. She said, don't you want to learn history? And I said, no, I want to write it. And
Really?
I said that. And so when I carried Reagan's tax cut and got a lot of publicity, she wrote me a nice note and said, you finally did, didn't you? You know.
Wow.
And but I had some great teachers, and that Mr. Newman was English teacher, and he always, one of his favorite quotes was, it's better to loved and lost than never loved at all. And he was one that you need to participate and try, no matter what, because what was happening. Because if you didn't, you'd wake up someday and you would wish that you'd participated in something. Mm-hmm. And so he was always encouraging to take a chance and do the next thing that you might want to do. And he was always very encouraging. But I had great teachers, and loved them all, and sometimes they had to explain to me, I mean, calm down. My mother got a call from one of the teachers one time, and the teacher said, I think he's going to be president of the United States or of Hell's Angels, and right now we're going with Hell's Angels on all bets. And I got in trouble and had to not be so wise and cutting up in class. But they had patience, and they had a vision for us, and they gave encouragement. And that's a great teacher. I love teachers that try to make sure you learn something, but also give you great encouragement to do certain things so that you'll be successful in life. And those are great teachers.
Well, must have been a good teacher. One of your former students just got appointed to a nice position.
Yeah, Andrew Hughes, a Texas Tech guy. He's 39, and he's now Deputy Secretary of HUD, H-U-D. And so, I mean, that to be a deputy cabinet member at 39 is just unheard of. He had been chief of staff for Ben Carson when Ben Carson was Secretary of HUD. Mm-hmm. So he had a background, and he knew what he was doing. Scott Turner, another Texan, was a Secretary of HUD. And if you're secretary, then you want to make sure that the deputy secretary is somebody you can work with and get along with. The Trump administration, they look at it, and sometimes they'll go with you, but sometimes they may put their own person out there. Mm-hmm. And that's true with any president. And they put their own person out there and let them decide, what they want to do. But the secretary of the agency, the head of the agency, the cabinet member, they always like to have somebody they know and feel comfortable with. And I think that works best. And that's kind of what's happened with this administration. They've had some that they wanted, but some of the deputies and deputy assistants are people that they've worked with for a long time. Rubio, he's got some people in his deputy secretaries, and some of them are Trump people, but a lot of them are his people and Trump's. And, they worked out people that you want people that will work together to be able to achieve whatever they want to achieve. And it's exciting to watch cabinet members put their cabinet together.
Especially when it's people you know.
Yeah, and and Andrew Hughes, he's married a Texas Tech girl, and they've got 3 children, and there's one that's 3 or 4, and twins that are 2.
Oh, they got their hands full.
They really have their hands full. There's a lot of activity. I want to talk a little, say a few words about March Madness. March Madness is the college basketball playoffs, and it comes up. It starts in March, and usually the first Monday in May is the championship game. And the teams, you start out with 68 teams, then you cut it to 32, and then you'll go to 16, and that's the Sweet 16. That's big time to make that. And then you go to the Elite 8, and that's only, whoever wins each of those games goes to the Final Four. And if you go to the Final Four, there's some teams that have been fortunate and played in a lot of Final Fours, and you have a chance to win the championship. UCLA has the record. They won 11 championships under John Wooden, who's one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, had the best record, and was a real gentleman, and had he would at the first of the season practices, he would show them how to put on your shoes and socks. And he'd tell them a certain way he wanted the socks put on and the shoes put on. And the reason he did that, if they weren't put on properly, you might get a burn, a
blister
on the foot, and it might get you out for a game. You might, and he wanted you to be properly dressed and be in a position that you wouldn't get blisters. And he paid attention to details. Mm-hmm. John Wooden was a detailed person. He wanted you to handle details, take care of details, and I think that's one of the reasons he was successful and won so many national championships. You look at who took his place and everything, that they didn't last long, they'd all get fired, but he was impossible to replace. Gene Bartow, who won big at Memphis, replaced him and made the Final Four and finally got fired. And the worst he ever did was be in the Sweet 16. Most teams would die to be in the Sweet 16. Mm-hmm. But UCLA had been out there before, and they expected to win and win big. But they had 11. You look at the Kentucky Wildcats, they've had 8 championships. And you go down to Indiana, and Duke had 5, and North Carolina and Connecticut had 6. And those are good teams. You take Villanova and Kansas. Kansas had 4 national championships, and Villanova had 3. So the teams are all good, and they're so good. If you're a little off on some night, you can get beat. You can have a great team and get beat. Mm-hmm. And there's been a couple of times that a 16 seed beat a number 1 seed, and so unusual things happen. And a lot of people watch all the games, watch every one they can, and they all want to play the bracket for their business or for their fellow office workers, and that makes it exciting. One of the things I wanted to bring out today, some unusual things that have happened. I was looking at the stupid criminals that, a guy, this was just unbelievable to me, stole an ambulance, and then police got after him. He ran, in the ambulance. It was a car chase. Now, why would you steal an ambulance? Were you drunk or just stupid? Mm-hmm. Or drunk and stupid? Could be both. And it's just a short period of time that you're jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, and that if you stole a car, it's one thing, but stealing an ambulance, we had a student one time that I was familiar with that he got intoxicated, and he woke up in an ambulance, and he was driving it. And he didn't know where he was, or that's when you have to evaluate. Maybe I shouldn't drink. Maybe I got to drink. That's not social drinking. Mm-hmm. If you wake up in an ambulance, driving it, going down the road, and you come to, you said, that's not social drinking. No. And so you need to do something else. It just takes a moment, and there was a definition that came out on moment, and a moment is 90 seconds. And there are 40 moments in an hour, so it comes out 90 seconds.
So if someone says, give me a moment?
Give me a moment. That technically means 90 seconds. Now, when they tell you that, they're just saying, give me a little time, mm-hmm. and which is unusual. One other thing that I was noticing is Mother's Day will be coming up. Mother's Day, the biggest day at KFC is Mother's Day. Don't take her to KFC on Mother's Day, you got to be pretty broke to do that, or she's got to really love it. There's a study that was out that 25% of Americans have burnout by the time they're 30. And I don't know what's wrong with them on that. I looked to see when burnout would happen on older guys, and they didn't say 82 or anything like that. So, maybe I hadn't gotten burnout yet. But they're saying that there's a lot of burnout between 25 and 44, and that you didn't have a very good job if you're burnout between 25 and 44. You need to have a job that you're excited about and that you're glad to get up and go every day.
What were you doing at that age, Chancellor? 25 to 44?
At 25, I was a professor at Texas Tech, and also I was practicing law. Mm-hmm. At 31, I was a state senator. And at 36, I was a congressman. And was pretty well on a fast track and met a lot of nice people and learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And really enjoyed that. They were talking about that 83% have burnout at some point in time before they get to be real adults of 50. And, if you're having a burnout at a younger age, I think it just means that you were in the wrong job, wrong position. You just didn't like it. Mm-hmm. And there are people that make good money that don't necessarily like what they do. Mm-hmm. And I always feel sorry for them. And I would tell you the advice I give, if you're, in your 30s or 50s and you're in burnout, then you need to look at some hobbies and look at the things you can do outside your work. Southwest Airlines, free bags a day's over. Mm-hmm. It stops in May, and you don't get free bags anymore, which means that everyone will be carrying on board their luggage. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know what happens. I guess they run out, when they run out of overhead storage, they make you check the bags, at the gate.
But they don't charge you that.
And they don't charge you. And I wonder if they'll continue to do that. Saint of the day was Stephen Curry, great basketball player, played at Davidson and now is the NBA. He always say, play like you're in first place, train like you're in second place. I like that.